All right, so you've been diving into AI in education, right? All those articles, all that research. It's a lot to take in, especially when it comes to tools like ChatGPT.
Yeah, it really is. It feels like it's changing everything so fast.
Exactly. And that's kind of the whole point of this deep dive. Let's cut through all the hype, all the noise, and figure out what's actually going on, how ChatGPT is changing teaching and learning for real, practically.
And maybe even have some fun along the way.
Absolutely. We've got a great collection of sources here, especially this paper that basically reviews everything that's out there right now. A real solid overview.
That's the one from May et al., right?
Uh,
2024.
Yep, that's the one. And it does a really good job of like capturing that initial whoa
Yeah.
moment when ChatGPT hit the scene in late 2022.
Right. Suddenly we had this tool that could give you these crazy detailed answers on like any topic.
It felt like magic almost.
Yeah.
And it really grabbed everyone's attention.
It did. I mean, remember all those early conversations? Everyone was talking about it.
It was everywhere. And it got people thinking, right? Like, what does this mean for education? How do we actually use this thing?
Huge question.
Huge. And that's what we're going to try to unpack together today. How can educators and learners, and really anyone who's interested in the future of education, make the most of AI tools, specifically ChatGPT?
And not just use them, right? But use them effectively, ethically, smartly.
Exactly. So let's jump in. AI in education. ChatGPT didn't just come out of nowhere, right?
Oh, definitely not. AI's been bubbling up in education for a while now.
Like what kind of stuff? Give me some examples.
Well, you've got those adaptive learning
Yeah.
platforms, the ones that change the content based on how a student's doing. And there's been some progress with automated grading systems, especially for like multiple choice tests.
Right, right. Makes sense. So what makes ChatGPT different?
It's that conversational thing, the way you interact with it. It feels more like you're talking to another person, like a dialogue, instead of just inputting data and getting an output.
It's that natural language interface,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. It's designed to feel more natural. And one of the sources you shared mentions just how quickly ChatGPT caught on, like wildfire. 100 million users in just 2 months.
Seriously.
Yeah. It shows you just how much interest there was and still is in this technology.
That's insane.
And those early surveys and studies, the ones that captured those first reactions, a lot of students saw ChatGPT as this like almost magical shortcut.
For homework, for research,
Yeah.
just get the answers quick, easy, and move on.
Yeah, there was a lot of that kind of sentiment at the beginning, a lot of aha moments. And teachers, too, they were jumping in, trying it out for lesson plans, for explaining tough concepts in new ways.
Even for making up quiz questions.
Exactly. So there was all this experimenting going on, lots of anecdotal stuff. But now we need to look at what the research is actually telling us. What are the documented benefits, the real potential, and just as importantly, what are the challenges? What are the concerns?
The good and the bad.
Right, because like you said before, it's a double-edged sword. Let's dig into those benefits first. That May et al. Review, the one from 2024, they looked at 51 different studies, right? What did they find? What were some of the big advantages of using ChatGPT?
Yeah, 51 studies. That's got to be a pretty good overview.
It is. And they found some really interesting stuff. Personalized learning experiences, for one. ChatGPT can actually adjust to a student's needs and provide information that's tailored to them.
So not just like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Exactly. It can adapt. And another big benefit is immediate feedback. Students can get answers and feedback right away, which can be super helpful for learning.
Yeah, that instant gratification thing can be powerful,
Yeah.
especially when you're struggling with a concept. And there was something in the research about how ChatGPT can be really helpful with writing, right?
Absolutely. From coming up with initial ideas to getting suggestions for improving a draft, it can be a real game changer for writing assignments.
Wow. So it's like having a personal tutor or a writing coach available 24/7. And for teachers, I bet it could help with all that lesson prep, all those materials they have to create.
Oh, for sure. The review talks about how teachers are using it to make quizzes, come up with examples for their lessons, even to draft outlines for whole units of instruction.
Saving them a ton of time, I bet.
Definitely. And that frees them up to focus on the things that really need a human touch, like facilitating discussions, working with students one-on-one, that kind of stuff.
Makes sense. So there's a lot of potential there, both for students and for teachers. But what about the learner's perspective specifically? What did the research say about how students are benefiting from ChatGPT?
Well, that on-demand tutoring aspect is huge. Students can get explanations and clarification whenever they need them. And it's not just about getting answers, it's about understanding the why behind the answers.
Right, making sure they're actually learning, not just memorizing facts.
Exactly. There was a study by Hassanin and Sobai, published in 2023, and they found that students really valued how quick and easy ChatGPT was to use. And they liked that it helped them with all sorts of things: problem solving, figuring out difficult concepts, proofreading their work, even getting ready for tests.
So it's like a super versatile study buddy. And I know some of the sources talked about how helpful it can be for students who are learning in a language that's not their native tongue.
Absolutely. That's a huge area of potential. And there's also a lot of interest in using ChatGPT for creating those low-stakes quizzes and assessments that help students check their understanding along the way.
Formative assessment.
Yeah, exactly. There's a paper by Sok and Heng from 2023 that really breaks down these benefits. They identify 5 major ways ChatGPT can be a game changer: creating assessments, enhancing teaching methods, providing virtual tutoring, helping with outlining papers, and facilitating brainstorming sessions.
Okay, so it's clear there's a lot of potential upside here. But like we said before, every coin has two sides.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not all sunshine and roses.
What are some of the concerns,
Yeah.
the challenges, the downsides?
That's where it gets really interesting and a little bit worrying, to be honest. That same review by May, at all, the one that highlighted all those benefits, well, they also found some pretty significant limitations.
Oh, okay, like what?
One of the big ones is accuracy. ChatGPT doesn't always get things right. It can make mistakes, sometimes even make stuff up.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah. And there's also the issue of bias. ChatGPT can reflect biases that are present in the data it was trained on, which can be really problematic.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. Like, if the data is skewed in a certain way, the AI can end up perpetuating those biases.
Exactly. And then there's this even more troubling thing the paper calls forged citations.
Yeah.
Basically, ChatGPT can sometimes make up sources and references.
Whoa, that's a big deal.
It is. And it's not just a technical glitch. It means we have to be even more careful about teaching students how to evaluate information critically, no matter where it comes from. And interestingly, the research found that ChatGPT doesn't seem to do much to boost student motivation on those really tough, challenging tasks.
So it's not a magic bullet for getting kids excited about learning.
Not necessarily. And then, of course, there's the elephant in the room, the potential for misuse, the cheating dilemma.
Yeah, that's what everyone's worried about, right? Students using ChatGPT to write their essays or do their coding assignments, and then passing it off as their own work.
Exactly. And that's a huge problem for educators because it really undermines the whole point of learning and assessment. There's a paper by Kaznechi and some colleagues that highlights this risk really well. They argue that if students just rely on ChatGPT without actually thinking critically about the material, it could actually stunt the development of their critical thinking skills.
So instead of helping them learn, it could actually be holding them back.
Potentially, yeah. And Sakenhang also talk about this in their research. They list academic integrity as a major concern, along with the potential for unfair assessments if some students are using AI and others aren't. And then there's the risk of spreading inaccurate information and this general worry about students becoming too reliant on AI.
Right, like they might just stop trying to learn on their own.
Yeah, and one of the sources even uses this phrase, deteriorated student skill sets. It's a scary thought.
It is. So it seems like there's a lot of agreement that how we use ChatGPT really matters.
Definitely. Holloway and Salem, two researchers who've written a lot about this, they basically say that the ultimate impact of ChatGPT depends entirely on how it's used. And Hazanan and Sobai really emphasize the need for responsible use guidelines. Like, we need to be really intentional about how we're using this technology if we want it to be a force for good in education.
Okay, so given all these benefits and all these risks, how can educators actually start using ChatGPT effectively? In real life, in their classrooms, every day?
Well, the research suggests a few really promising approaches. For things like lesson planning and creating teaching materials, ChatGPT can be a huge help. It can generate quiz questions, come up with examples, and even draft outlines for entire lessons, all based on the teacher's prompts.
So it's like a supercharged assistant for all that prep work.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a qualitative study mentioned in one of your sources where a bunch of college professors talked about how they were using ChatGPT. They found it really useful for gathering information on a topic and even for getting started with building a syllabus for a new course.
Wow. So, like, if a teacher needs to explain a really complicated concept, say mitosis in biology class, They could ask ChatGPT to give them a summary that's appropriate for high school students. And then they could take that summary and tweak it, make it their own, and adapt it to their students' specific needs.
That's a great example. And it's not just about summaries. ChatGPT can come up with different examples or analogies to explain a single idea, which can be really helpful for reaching students who learn in different ways.
Right, because everyone learns differently. Some people are visual learners, some people need to hear it, some people need to do it.
Exactly. And the research also mentions using ChatGPT to give students quick feedback on their writing. But there's a really important caveat here. The instructor still needs to review that feedback and make sure it's accurate and appropriate.
So it's like a first pass, a way to help students identify areas where they might need to improve before the teacher even looks at it.
Exactly. And ChatGPT can be amazing for brainstorming. Teachers can ask it for ideas for discussion questions, project topics, case studies related to what they're teaching, all sorts of stuff. It can really help them think outside the box and come up with fresh ideas.
And I remember one of the sources talked about using ChatGPT as a kind of simulated student or expert in the classroom. Like you could have a conversation with the AI in front of the class, ask it a challenging question, and then have the students analyze its response. I love that idea.
Yeah, me too. It's a really cool way to get students thinking critically and engage them in the material. And at its core, what ChatGPT can do is take on some of those more routine, lower-level tasks for teachers.
Creating multiple choice quizzes, creating basic worksheets, things like that.
Exactly. And that frees up teachers to focus on the higher level teaching, the stuff that really requires human expertise and interaction, like leading those deep discussions, working with students who are struggling, providing personalized support. It's about leveraging the AI to make the best use of everyone's time and talents.
Okay, so that's how educators can use ChatGPT. What about students? How can they use it effectively without falling into those traps of just relying on it for answers or, using it to cheat?
Well, the research suggests thinking about it as a readily available tutor or study buddy, a resource that's there to support your learning.
Right, but you still have to do the learning.
Exactly. And one of the most effective ways students can use it is for clarifying things they're having trouble with. They can ask ChatGPT to explain something from class in a different way or maybe give them another example. And because it remembers the conversation, they can really go back and forth with it to make sure they understand.
So it's like having a conversation with a really patient tutor who never gets tired of explaining things.
That's a great way to put it. And research has actually found that students really appreciate this kind of on-demand help. They say it's a much easier and more direct way to get the information they need compared to traditional search engines or even textbooks.
And ChatGPT can even help students practice and get feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Students can give it problems to solve, whether it's a math equation or a question about history, and ChatGPT can give them feedback on how they're doing. It can even create practice quizzes or act like a debate partner.
So students can test themselves and see how they're doing without the pressure of a real test. And I know some sources mention how useful ChatGPT can be for developing writing skills.
Definitely. It can help students with outlining their essays, critiquing their drafts. But again, it's really important that students don't just blindly accept whatever ChatGPT suggests. They need to think critically about the feedback and make their own decisions.
It's about using it as a tool to enhance their own skills, not to replace their own effort. And the research also talks about how ChatGPT can personalize its responses to a student's level of understanding.
Right, that's a huge advantage. A student could ask ChatGPT to explain something like supply and demand, but to explain it as if they were talking to a 12-year-old.
And it would adjust the language and examples to make it more understandable.
Exactly. It can adapt to the learner's needs. And this can be super helpful for students who are still learning English or who just need things explained in a simpler way.
So the key takeaway here is that ChatGPT can be a really powerful learning tool, but only if students use it in the right way.
Exactly. It's about using it as a way to learn, not just a way to get the answer.
One of the sources gave this great example. Instead of asking ChatGPT for the answer to a physics problem, a student could ask for a hint or the next step in the solution process and then try to work through it on their own. I love that.
Yeah, that's a great example of using ChatGPT in a way that promotes learning, not just answer getting. And the research actually shows that students who understand ChatGPT's limitations and use it in combination with their own knowledge tend to be much more successful.
It's about being smart about it, right?
Yeah.
Knowing what it's good for and what it's not.
Right. And a big theme that keeps coming up in the research is this idea of collaboration. It's not just about individuals using ChatGPT on their own, but about how educators and students can work together with the AI to enhance learning and critical thinking.
So how does that work in practice?
Well, one example is using ChatGPT to generate a piece of writing, like an essay or a short story, and then having students critique it together.
So instead of ChatGPT being the ultimate authority, it becomes the starting point for a deeper discussion.
Exactly. It's a way to flip the script. And students can also use ChatGPT together to brainstorm ideas for projects, and then they can discuss and evaluate those ideas as a group.
I like that. It turns ChatGPT into more of a collaborative tool.
And the research actually suggests that this kind of interactive approach can make ChatGPT a much more effective learning partner, one that encourages real engagement and critical thinking.
But it sounds like it's important to have some guidelines for how students use ChatGPT in these collaborative settings.
Absolutely. The sources emphasize that teachers should be really clear about expectations, like requiring students to annotate any AI-generated text with their own thoughts and insights.
Oh, they have to show that they're not just blindly accepting what the AI says.
Right. Or maybe asking students to compare what ChatGPT says with what they've learned from their textbooks or lectures, and to identify any discrepancies or contradictions.
Those are great ideas. It's about making sure that students are actively thinking and engaging with the material, even when they're using AI.
Exactly. And all of this is really about helping students develop those core skills of evaluation and critical thinking, skills that some people worry AI might actually diminish.
So we've talked a lot about how ChatGPT can be used effectively, but what about the practical side of things? How do we actually integrate it into education in a smart, responsible way?
That's where the rubber meets the road, right? And the research is pretty clear that we need to be proactive about this. We can't just throw ChatGPT into schools and universities and hope for the best.
So what are some of the key strategies?
Well, one of the most important things is training and professional development for both teachers and students. A lot of people might not really understand what ChatGPT can and can't do, how it works, how to use it effectively, and what the ethical considerations are.
So we need to educate people about the tool itself before we can expect them to use it responsibly.
Exactly. Educators need training on how to write good prompts, how to fact-check what ChatGPT produces, how to incorporate it into their lessons in a way that supports learning. Students need guidance on how to use it ethically, how to avoid plagiarism, how to make sure they're actually learning and not just getting answers.
Makes sense. And what about policies? Do schools and universities need to have specific policies about using AI?
The sources definitely recommend that. Without clear guidelines, it's just going to be chaos. We need to set boundaries, define what's okay and what's not okay when it comes to AI use in education.
Right, like, is it okay to use ChatGPT to improve your grammar? Is it okay to use it to generate study questions? But maybe it's not okay to use it to write a whole essay and then submit it as your own work.
Exactly. Those are the kinds of things that need to be spelled out. And there's also the issue of equity and access. We need to make sure that all students have the opportunity to benefit from these tools.
Especially if ChatGPT becomes something that you have to pay for to use.
Right. Schools might need to think about providing access to all students, especially those who can't afford it on their own. And the research also talks about the need to rethink how we assess students. Like, if AI can write essays and solve problems, how do we know if a student has actually learned the material?
That's a good point. Do we need to change the kinds of assignments we give? The way we test students?
Maybe. Some of the sources suggest that we need to move away from assignments that AI can easily do. Like maybe we need more in-class writing, more oral presentations, more assignments that require critical thinking and analysis.
So assignments that really require students to show their understanding, not just their ability to use AI.
Exactly. And we might need to focus more on assessing the process of learning, not just the final product. Like maybe we ask students to keep reflection journals or give presentations about how they arrived at their answers, even if they used AI along the way.
And some sources even suggest designing assignments that specifically involve using AI, but in a transparent way.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. Like having students use ChatGPT to generate a first draft of an essay, and then they have to revise and edit it and explain how the AI's input helped them.
It's about making AI a part of the learning process, but not the end-all, be-all. So it seems like while ChatGPT offers a lot of potential benefits, it's not without its limitations. What are some of the key things we need to keep in mind?
The biggest one is that ChatGPT doesn't actually understand the information it's giving you. It can sound really convincing, but it can make mistakes. It can even hallucinate, meaning it can just make stuff up. Its knowledge is only as good as the data it was trained on.
So it's not always accurate, and it doesn't always have the most up-to-date information.
Right, and it can't tell if a student is actually understanding the material or just pretending to. It can't gauge comprehension or emotional state like a human teacher can.
So it's not a replacement for a teacher, it's more like a supplement, a tool to be used in conjunction with human instruction.
Exactly. And it's not that great at genuine creativity. It can recombine and rehash things it's learned, but it can't really come up with truly original ideas or insights.
So it's good at what it does, but it has its limits.
Yeah.
What does the research say about where we go from here? What kind of future research is needed?
Well, because all of this is so new, a lot of the current research is really just exploratory. We
Right.
need more long-term studies to see how using AI chatbots actually affects learning over time.
Yeah. We need to see how it plays out in the real world, not just in short-term experiments.
Exactly. And we need more research across all levels of education, from elementary school to college, because the challenges and the best practices might be different depending on the age of the students and the subject matter.
Right. One size doesn't fit all. And the research also talks about the need for specialized AI tools that are designed specifically for education, like maybe an EDO-GPT that's trained on reliable academic sources and knows how to cite things properly.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And it would be really interesting to see how ChatGPT could be integrated with other educational technologies. Like, imagine if it could be built into online learning platforms or used in virtual labs.
So many possibilities.
So many. But it's important to remember that all of this needs to be done with a lot of careful thought and consideration. We need to be constantly evaluating the ethical implications of using AI in education, thinking about issues of equity and access, making sure that we're not creating new problems while trying to solve old ones.
Okay, so big picture. What's the main message here about ChatGPT in education?
I think the bottom line is that it really depends on how we use it.
It's not inherently good or bad.
Right. If we use it thoughtfully and responsibly, ChatGPT has the potential to be a really powerful tool for personalized learning, for creating engaging learning materials, for making teachers' lives easier, but it also has the potential to backfire spectacularly.
It's up to us to make sure it's used for good.
Exactly. And that means having the right training and professional development for both teachers and students, having clear guidelines and policies in place, and being willing to adapt our teaching and assessment methods to this new reality.
We need to stay flexible, keep learning, and be open to new possibilities.
And we always need to keep the human element at the heart of education.
That's so important. ChatGPT might be a powerful tool, but it's not a replacement for human connection, human interaction, human mentorship.
Couldn't agree more. It's about using AI to enhance what we do best as humans, not to replace us.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive into a fascinating and complex topic. So much to think about. And I'm curious, considering everything we've discussed, what's one aspect of ChatGPT's integration in education that you think will have the most significant long-term impact, whether positive or negative? And what questions does that raise for you for your own learning and professional growth?